Was at an airport on a layover at 7 o'clock at night, drinking Pepsi and eating Starburst because this is what I thought I needed to fuel my body to catch this flight. And I sneezed and threw out my back, and I'm reading like celebrity gossip magazines because God forbid I put anything good and smart and awesome in my body or my brain. And I just had this moment like, why am I doing this to myself? You know, the change we're looking for is us, right? We are the change we've been waiting for, and there's no cavalry coming. And I took those words to heart. There is no cavalry coming for you. So how could I give 72%, my best 72%, and then claw back some time for me? Because I knew I was operating at an exceptional level, but if I looked around me, nobody else was given 110%.
Laurie, how are you?
Lexi, I'm thrilled to be here. It's so good to see you. Thanks for the invite.
Of course. Thank you so much for coming. It's been a long time. How have you been?
Good. I mean, the world is crazy and chaotic, and I'm perpetually irritated and prone to rage and anger. But other than that, I'm terrific, you know? Yeah.
Yeah. No, I feel that and hear that and agree with that completely.
Yeah.
So where are your people from?
Well, you know, funny you should ask this question because I have some siblings who love to do the deep dive on where our people are from. And I always tell them if it was so great, they wouldn't have come to America, you know, at least in our case. So my people are from all over, but my people that I love and I care about are based in Chicago. So that's where I was born and raised for the first 17 years. But I've been in the South now for almost 20 years. So I tell people I was born in the North, but my heart and my gravesite will be in the South.
How did you get to the South? So I was born and raised in St. Louis, Missouri, and then moved out to California. And my childhood best friend a few weeks ago decided to remind me that I'm at the cusp now where I'm about to be in California longer than I was living in St. Louis, which is a wild thought to have. What was the move like from Chicago to the South? Was that for school? Was that for how do we do that?
Yeah, my husband and I moved down here for work, and you know, the pharmaceutical industry is big in North Carolina, so that's where we're based. And I didn't feel sad about leaving the Midwest at all. It seemed regressive and it seemed like really stifling. And the city of big shoulders can also be the city of cruelty and bias and really stupid old ways of operating. And although Chicago always claims it's going through a renaissance, the proof is in the pudding and it's not there. So I moved to the South and I was actually quite surprised at how open and welcoming and interesting and truly diverse some of these communities are in a way that Chicago, being so segregated, was not. And so I feel like my life opened up when I moved to the South. I started spending more time in Atlanta and DC and here in, you know, Durham, North Carolina. And I just felt like this is home for the first choice. You know, you're born where you're born. But when you get to make a choice, which is a blessing for so many of us, boy, that choice can be real. And for me, it was real. And I will never move back north.
I hear you. I hear you. Today, we're going to talk about how your labor, your work is not your worth. And that is such a deep and complex, I would argue, therapy session.
Right.
Because it takes a lot. It takes a lot of work and a lot of unlearning, Laurie, for individuals to really be in a state of really understanding, like militantly understanding that the labor they put out is not a reflection of the worth they are as a human being on this planet.
You know, the way you put that is so beautiful because it does take a lifetime to unwind the very early messages that most of us are given. I'm a first generation college student in my family. And so there was a lot put on me that if you're going to go to college, you're going to do it to get an identity, to get a job, and to make money. And I did that for over a decade. Like I really put my heart and soul in a career in the world of human resources. And time again, it broke my heart. It broke my heart because I realized dang, I'm complicit with capitalism. And we all are. Like, if we're not born with the silver spoon in our mouths, we're going to have to do some work that we don't want to do. But the more I tried to have my job align with my identity, which is the prevailing message, the more I ended up in therapy, the more I ended up on antidepressants. And it took a really significant case of burnout and just utter and complete sadness with my life to start the process that still exists today of reminding myself that my work is not my worth, and what that means for how I earn income, what that means for what I believe about government programs and education and all of the messages that we get. I'm still learning to this day.
Mm. Do you remember, let's go back to like little Laurie as a child. Do you remember when you first recognized that having a certain type of job, having a job period, meant something very important, not only in society, but at school, but also at home on Sunday dinner?
You know, my father and neither one of my parents have an education. My dad finished high school. My mom has a GED. But my dad was lucky enough to get hired by the phone company back when they were still kind of a big monopoly. And, you know, he worked himself up to like middle management and didn't have an amazing job, but it was something. And it was something that he was proud of until people around him were promoted and he was not, because of his lack of a college degree. And people around him did well because they belonged to the right organizations or went to the proper church or whatever it was. And I very quickly realized that comparison is the thief of joy, because my dad had all of these really beautiful things in his life. He had a family,
Yeah.
he had, you know, a townhome that we lived in. I mean, we had all these privileges that were just baked into the fact that he was born who he was, and he was able to hustle and scrap and, you know, get to a position where we were safe, and it was never enough. And instead of really appreciating the gifts that he had been given and some of the things that he had worked for, he drank. And the more he drank, the more he fell backwards in his career. And it was almost as if the thing he wanted was always going to be out of reach, because it always is in capitalism, but it was also out of reach because he didn't realize that living a good life meant more than just this thing he did from 9 to 5. So I had a very interesting front row seat into identity at a very early age. And I thought, okay, that's not going to be me. But it turns out that's kind of all of us until we take accountability for really establishing our own identities.
So when you started applying to college, right, with all of this background, and you started applying to college, and as you said, even your parents were like, look, we didn't go to college. You're about to go to college and you're going to get this great job and have all these things that we didn't have. You're the next legacy, Laurie, of capitalism for the family. How did this really shape / encourage / influence your education decisions, even down to your major? Because I know for me, my major was heavily influenced by what I thought others wanted me to do instead of what I actually wanted to do. Yeah.
You know, I had a bit of a chaotic upbringing because of the drinking. My parents separated at an early age, and I bounced back and forth between a lot of caregivers. My grandmother raised me for a significant amount of time, and then I turned 14, and the safest thing for me to do was to live with my dad for a couple of years, and my dad's career was on the decline. So I enrolled in this school in his neighborhood, and people took one look at me and thought, what's going to come of her? You know, people actually said to me, you know what you ought to do? You ought to be a flight attendant. Now, I'm 5 feet tall. How that would be a good idea just is beyond me. But I had a cute smile. You know, I'm blonde, I'm perky, even though I'm incredibly cynical and foul-mouthed, you know, but I can fake it. And so right at the age of 14, I went and got a job. I lied about my age. I always hustled through high school. And I had a high school boyfriend whose parents said to me, you ought to take the SAT and the ACT. And I said, what's that? Well, I took the SAT and the ACT and I did extremely well. So finally, the guidance counselors were like, oh my gosh, you might be able to go to college. There's this thing called a scholarship, and let's take a look at this. And so I learned the hard way. The path, again, I had no parents, I had no family members who had filled out a FAFSA form, right? You know, so I went through all of this. And when I Graduated early because, again, I hustled to get out of this environment that I was in. I thought, okay, I'm going to go to law school. That's going to be my path because in my mind, lawyers were rich. Like it's what you see on TV, right?
Oh, yeah. I totally it makes sense to me. I've seen Suits multiple times, Lori. That makes sense.
Right. So I also liked reading. Reading was a big escape for me. So I thought, okay, I'm going to go to school and study English and, take out all these student loans. And then from there, I'm going to take the LSAT and go to college. Well, it turns out that the student loan debt crisis was real, especially in the in the mid to late 90s. That was the beginning of this. And I graduated in 1997 with about $50,000 in student debt, which is today about $150,000. I thought, I can't afford to go to law school. This is crazy. Why would I do this to myself? So I asked a guidance counselor at my school, at my university, what should I do? And she said, we've got this internship open in human resources. Why don't you do that and see if you like marketing or sales? You can see all of the organization, and then maybe you'll figure out a career. And it turns out I like people. I root for the underdog. I like stories. I like learning about the human condition. And I also very early recognized that people were just like me, trying to figure out their worth, their identity through their jobs. And so a career was born.
I love that. I love that. When in your career did you have that breaking point of, I have to decouple my labor from my human worth? Because I remember when I had that really deep moment and then it was like, how do I do it? But what was that? Was it a moment for you? Was it a mix of moments where you just had to make the decision, I need to figure out how to go on an adventure to figure out who I am without defining myself with the work that I do?
Well, I found myself working at this company called Pfizer. I don't know if anybody's heard of it. It's just a little drug company, right? So I worked for Pfizer. I mean, I would work for anybody who would pay me money. And so Pfizer offered me an exceptional offer. And I said yes. And I started on this journey where they're like, you know what you're really good at? Delivering bad news. I see the human in people, right? I don't see people just as a line item on a budget. And so they trained me on how to deliver layoff news. And I flew around the country like the old-timey movies. And actually, I flew around the world because I was very good at navigating the world of works councils and laid people off. And a couple things happened. Number one, my husband also worked there. And I told him, honey, you're about to be laid off. And he said, I love you, but what do you know? You're just in HR. Well, he's never said anything like that to me again. So there was that moment. And then during one of the layoffs, I was at an airport on a layover at 7 o'clock at night, drinking Pepsi and eating Starburst because this is what I thought I needed to fuel my body to catch this flight, right? And I sneezed and threw out my back, and I'm reading like celebrity gossip magazines because God forbid I put anything good and smart and awesome in my body or my brain. And I just had this moment like, why am I doing this to myself? Pfizer, God love them for the vaccine, always has money for Pfizer. Pfizer always takes care of itself. Why am I not running my life like a business? Why am I not putting myself first? And I didn't quit the next day after throwing out my back, but it began this journey of planning of how to exit and really run my life like a business. So I just talked to really smart people. I thought, the world should mentor me. I just felt this profound sense of entitlement at that moment because I was so low. I was in pain and I was tired and I was exhausted. Like, I need help. And if I don't ask for it, I'm not going to get it. I don't know what spirit, what universal force flew through my body that night, but I just decided, I'm going to start to put myself first. Now, do I always do that? No. Am I chronically there for other people? Of course I am. It's my DNA. I love human beings. But just in that moment, I thought, I got to ask really smart people how they always make time for themselves. And, Lexi, it's a combination of self-leadership and individual accountability. It is a profound focus on well-being. It's an amazing focus on learning. Like the best people in this world are learning and growing and thriving. There's no choice for them. And then people have really figured out how to de-risk some of their choices. Not all choices are great. The fact that I no longer work in corporate America means I don't have a 401k match. But you know what? It's all right. I'm like making money other ways and I'm making choices and I haven't been to the Maldives yet, but I will go, like it'll come, it'll happen for me. So it's just this combination of really taking ownership and accountability, but also really, really recognizing that if I don't do it for me, no one's going to do it for me. I quote Barack Obama all the time. He said, the change we're looking for is us, right? We are the change we've been waiting for, and there's no cavalry coming. And I took those words to heart. There is no cavalry coming for you. So that's my story of really beginning to kind of uncouple this idea that my work is my worth. Lexi, you and I are awesome. We deserve it all. Whether or not we have a fantastic job title or not, we deserve love, education, respect, dignity, healthcare. And so I take this very personally. And in my work that I do, I focus on things like universal basic income, really creating a floor for all of us because there is enough money in this world and we deserve our fair share. And also these tech companies are making money on us and lying about it. We are providing labor for them when we scroll, when we look, when we click, when they leak our data, all of it. They owe us. We don't owe them. So there's enough money for universal basic income, a floor for all of us to just thrive.
Take me back to the day after the airport with the Starburst and the Pepsi. And you said, I can't do this anymore. I think there are a lot of people who have that reckoning moment, whether it's with Pepsi or Starburst. And also shout out to Starburst. I have not heard that name in a very long time. So you had this moment where you were like, I have to do something different. I will start doing something different. So how did this, let's say, updated Laurie, how did you start interacting with work? Because it sounds like you had this moment of, I got to do something different, but I can't just go to work tomorrow and be like, I'm out.
No.
But it also sounds like how in which you interacted with work, your boundaries, what you prioritized had to be different. What did that look like? I know a lot of people who've had their Starburst moment, but just don't know how to change behavior as they still navigate the corporate world.
All right. So one of the things that I recommend we all do, no matter where we are in our lives, is to have a therapist. And I was lucky enough to have access to good mental health resources because I thought if I don't change my life, truly, I'm going to step in front of a bus and this has to end. And I don't deserve to step in front of a bus. I don't deserve this. Thank God, that spiritual moment happened in my life because for me and for so many others, it's like the lowest point you can get to. And the question becomes why? And the answer for me was why not? But you're right. There's no like waking up the next morning and piecing out, even in a good way, right? I still had a mortgage to pay. I still had obligations. I needed health insurance to get that amazing mental health care, right? So I started to do things like make a list of all the people I thought were killing it in this world. I reach out to them and say, why are you killing it? And you know what many of them said to me? I'm killing it, sort of, but it's been a journey. Let me tell you the story. And they were all in therapy. All of them, like down to the individual contributor who I thought was just showing up at work and doing a great job. She's like, yeah, I show up, but I'm in therapy, right? Like everybody had a resource. And so that was a really important message for me to receive from the universe. The other thing that people really showed me and that I started to do for myself is to wake up and say, there's no changing tomorrow. There's no life moment. This is going to be a journey and I'm going to be patient. I also had this fundamental belief, Lexi, that I no longer needed to give 110%, but yet a job worth doing is a job worth doing well. So how could I give 72%, my best 72%, and then claw back some time for me? Because I knew I was operating at an exceptional level, but if I looked around me, nobody else was given 110% and they were thriving. So I'm like, all right, what's that number for me where I could feel good about my work output? I didn't feel like I was a total slacker, but I could be a slacker just a little bit. And so that number for me was around 72%. If I showed up, I did a job. And again, I leaned into this like belief that was drilled into me that a job worth doing is a job worth doing well. I could get away with taking that other 28% for me. And there's actually a key term for this. It's called professional detachment. And the FBI teaches it. Pilots teach it, like first responders get to know it. It's how we don't get burned out, right? It's how we don't get compassion fatigue. You treat your job like it's a job. You're the CEO of your life. You do what you say you're going to do. You show up and you meet commitments, but you stop being weird about it. And I thought, my God, I'm such a weirdo right now. I need more time for me. I need a hobby, and that's the other thing I did. I started to try to figure out, like, what do I like outside of work? I didn't have an answer, but I was going to go find out, And so there's this really crazy thing that I read about on the internet, even back then, like a little project that you can do to figure out who you are. You make a list of all the things you want to try or the projects you need to do, and you put them like in a shoebox, right? You just write them down on a sheet of paper, and every day you pick one. Doesn't mean you have to do it that day, but it gets your mind thinking. So I had things like digitize old family photos, take a crocheting class, like stupid shit like that, and I may not on a random Tuesday want to digitize photos because that's a big project and I would throw it back in the box, but at least it got me thinking about the things that I wanted to tackle in the world. But making that list of like 20 to 30 things to put in the shoebox was a project itself, right? But I started down this road of just like trying to figure out who I was and what I enjoyed in the world. I'm going to give you the other secret thing I did to change my life. I started volunteering. Because when you volunteer, you break that loop of just focusing on yourself. Because even when you are struggling and you think nobody's paying attention to me and my life is terrible, you're still caught in this inward reflective loop. And volunteering taught me my place in the world. It gave me perspective on what other people were going through. And it gave me a sense of empathy and compassion externally that I thought I had but didn't quite have. But also it developed it for myself a little bit deeper. So I volunteer with both people and animals. And I have to tell you, that combination for me, like doing 2 pieces of volunteering, I've never changed in my life.
So tell me about the people in your life that supported this evolution and possibly the people in your life that didn't. Did you see, as you started going into yourself and saying, who am I as a human? Just who am I as a human without the workforce? Were there people that celebrated that and said, go, Laurie, go? And were there people that you had to lovingly let go because they just couldn't understand the transformation?
Well, there were a couple of people at work who I now recognize as kindred spirits who were Gen X slackers, right? But I thought they were killing it, like all company cars and, executive benefits and just doing amazing work in the world of Pfizer. And they're like, yeah, we just figured out how to work the system. Like, you think I'm coming to work, you think I'm giving 110%? Sure, when I'm on the job, but my weekends are for me and nobody's fired me yet. They were brave, they were courageous, they just tested the limits, right? And they also gave me the message, calm down. Like, just calm down. Like, this is not a big deal. Like, what are you doing? Like, you think your career is the most important thing in your world? This is a joke. You're being a dork. Like, I was like, oh shit, I am, like, why am I like thinking I'm going to save humanity through my job in human resources? Like, thank you for this perspective. So I talked to people in sales and even in human resources who are killing it. And they were just cruel to be kind. And that was exactly what I needed. They were like, weren't you punk rock at one point? What happened to you? And I'm like, oh. And it also made me realize that I could relate to people on a human level. My coworkers weren't just my coworkers. They weren't my competitors. They secretly had a key. And it was just a glorious realization that, oh, they're human too. I don't have any children, and some of them had children, some didn't, but they're like, you think this job is the most important thing in my life? I got kids, like, I'm like, oh, duh. Okay. Yeah, I get it now, so real talk saved my life. The people I had to let go were the people who were killing it, but who were not vulnerable and who were not honest with me and who were like, you know what you need to do? You need to get your MBA. Like, dang, I'm still paying off student debt from, 7, 8, 10 years ago, right? I'm not getting my MBA. That's not going to happen for me. So the people who were not vulnerable were the ones who just had to exit from my life. There were also people, as I started to kind of figure out that this was a game, who would not admit it was a game. Who would say, no, Pfizer's colors were blue and white. I bleed blue. I go to, the Alps and I ski every year. I take my family to Hawaii. I do all of these amazing things. I'm going to bleed blue until they kick me out the door. I thought, all right, well, that's good for you, but I just can't. And so those were the people who had to exit from my life. So do I have people who are like rah-rah about work? Oh, yeah, they're still all around me, but I know better. I'm older now, and I know that they're playing the game. They're just not being honest with themselves. And playing the game sometimes means, for my slacker friends, doing things that were unpalatable or going along with company decisions. Because again, none of us, at least the people I know, were born of wealth. They don't have like deep-seated generational wealth, and so they're benefiting from what's being kicked back to them from institutional progress, air quotes. And they're like, okay, I've made a decision, but I'm going to go to work. I'm going to do the best I can. And then, as Toni Morrison says, I'm going to go home and be with my people. And they went home and they enjoyed the time with their people. So I learned a lot from those individuals. And the people who play the game and are relentless about it, I no longer have in my life.
Why do you think we have this fantastic, like very effective PR campaign around labor?
Well, because it pays well for those who are the loudest. I think that's just the only way I can say it. For those who benefit, they benefit from keeping the system going. But the question I always ask is, are you benefiting? They'll come to me now that I do executive coaching at 55, thinking about what's next. And they'll often realize, I've got these golden handcuffs that are keeping me to this job. And I've got children and partners and family members who are reliant on me to perform. But I'm tired. I'm exhausted. But I still need to do this for another 5 years. Choices are tough. So we start to peel back. Where can you be a slacker? Where can you reclaim your time? Where can you reclaim your identity? But these are not easy and tough conversations, and they don't get solved with executive coaching. They get solved in therapy.
See? Because at this point, this is not about, are you good at your job? This is about what boundaries are you going to not only put up, but keep them up? And then therefore, what hard conversations are you willing to entertain when people want to push that boundary? And that is not a labor conversation. That's a you conversation.
That's right. And I think it's interesting how millennials who were sold this idea from their boomer parents on your work is your worth are now having this realization and actually do take pride in solving big problems. And God love them, we need people to solve big problems. And we need people to put up with corporate shenanigans and BS and play the game to some extent, because that's how work gets done in our society right now. And I do have this fear that if we burn it all down, we just rebuild it in the same way, because that's what we've been doing for millennia, right? So it's a tough conversation, and it's not a conversation that gets solved in our lifetimes. But how do you stay true to you? How do you perform? How do you mask? How do you do the things you need to do in order to live a really great and interesting life outside of work is an individual conversation that you have to have every day, and that all these years later, I'm still having with myself. How do I keynote at a company that is part of the climate change problem? How do I get on an airplane and have a carbon footprint like I have to go talk to people about quote unquote fixing work when everything I did to arrive at their doorstep hasn't fixed work? How do I go talk to people who really want to be better managers who are never going to be better managers at their organizations? What I'm really doing is showing up, playing the game, and trying to speak to their souls, trying to let them know, you know what, some boundaries are never going to be broken, and that's okay. So, how do I tell people you're never going to have this job forever when their employer is paying me to come and talk about like learning and development and growth, right? It is a conversation. It is a tightrope that I walk daily, and I'm just trying to normalize that with people.
Let me add another question to your arsenal. How do we have conversations about motivating people and people finding their worth outside of work when the increase of layoffs in the current climate is very high? And I was talking to someone a few weeks ago about this, and I said, in all my years of adulting with capitalism, I think what terrifies me about this round of layoffs in the current capitalist society, because Laurie, as you know, we go up and down. This is not the first time that I have seen layoffs of this magnitude, but this is the first time where I've seen them of this magnitude in jobs not coming back. Like I remember in 2020, we had, I would argue, very similar types of layoff waves, but the job was going to come back. So there was opportunities for people who were getting let go. This situation right here, Laurie, I think is new territory. So how do we encourage folks to say, hey, decouple yourself from labor emotionally, mentally, and spiritually, when there are a lot of people who are terrified of not being able to provide for their family financially?
When I work with individuals or just when I talk to people like you, I have one message that I give to them. It's like, they're going to dare you to be poor. You could do it. These companies are really going to push the limits of what they can pay you if you're still employed, or push the limits on letting you go, not hiring you back, not paying you the severance that you deserve, right? All of it. They're daring you to be poor. Rise to that challenge, because we still have power as consumers. And we have this notion of what it takes to survive. We have to do this, we have to do that. And many of us have lived a life with not much. We know how to do it. We may have forgotten, but we know how to do it. And you lean into community, you lean into family, you lean into your values, which is an exercise that many of us haven't done. We've gone through the corporate values statement of, I believe in this and I believe in that. We all know corporations don't believe in anything except profit and revenue, right? So where's that statement for you? What do you believe in? What's the core center? Do you believe in a type of spirituality? Do you believe in your family? Do you believe in coming together in important moments? And how can you rebuild those community networks that are lost? I think this is the conversation more and more of us are going to have. I also do this exercise with people who are freaking out about layoffs. Like, okay, let's take it to the extreme. Are you going to lose your house? What are you going to do? Let's plan for that. Are you going to lose healthcare? Let's plan for that. Like, let's take it to the craziest possible extreme. What does that look like? This is called a pre-mortem. And how do we plan for these situations before they happen? And if you can start to plan for failure doing this pre-mortem, you improve your chance of success by over 30%. So what are you going to do to make sure if your family needs it, you're always going to have health care? For a lot of my clients, that's rethinking their relationship with work. Like, what are the jobs that still are going to have health care, right? Trader Joe's offers health care, right?
They
Would you
do.
work at Trader Joe's, right?
Costco offers healthcare. Okay.
Absolutely. Like, we're going to figure it out, right? So it's starting to rethink what work is and what the ends and the means are to get to where we need to protect ourselves and our families. So it's a tough conversation, but if Bill Gates and Jeff Bezos are going to dare us to be poor, let's take that and let's figure out how to do it with dignity and integrity. I too am also working on behalf of really important issues. I'm working on behalf of universal basic income, which is happening. It's going to happen. I'm working with a foundation right now that's thinking through how to educate lawmakers on that, how to tell these stories, how to fund pilots, and how to collect the data from these pilots, and also how to create the technology platform to distribute UBI when that happens. So I'm working really hard to make sure that people don't have to dare to be poor. And I think more of us can do that work, can volunteer with these social issues that are going to protect us down the road. You got time on your hands from a layoff, get involved in the future. That's my advice.
And it also sounds like we as humans in capitalism have to take some stock in what we think our finances should be. With the social media age, Laurie, I always tell folks, as a person who's worked for social media companies, as a person who's a user of social media, you see these beautiful moments of how it can bring people together, literally. But you also see this comparison, right? And so people want more and want more and want more. And I think that we do have to have some real conversations around your individual self, your individual value, and money. And I had to have that awakening in my mid-20s, where I was like, okay, so where do I sit in finances? Where do I want to sit? Where do I need to sit? And what is this stuff from a consumerism standpoint that I'm like, I need that, but I don't actually need it. And my happiness should not be caught up in extra money if I don't need it. Does that make sense?
For many years, corporations have been on this financial literacy bandwagon. They want you to squeeze blood out of a turnip. And the real message is, you know what? Donald J. Trump filed bankruptcy a whole bunch of times. If this is what you need to do, there is no shame in that. But the rebuilding is the important piece of this, right? The rebuilding and really identifying what you need and what you don't need is key. And sometimes for me, I know that has meant stay the heck off social media. I don't need to be looking at beauty talk all day long. I'm 50 years old. If I want to be an entrepreneur, there is a certain pressure to look and to act a certain way, but I learned very quickly, I don't need a new outfit every time I keynote. This is a new audience every time I see this is a new outfit to them. I actually think I'm not aging in reverse. I definitely am looking like a Gen X woman, but I think there's something really beautiful that I don't have deep-seated painful lines in my face because I'm not angry at work all the time, right? I don't necessarily need the Botox every 12 weeks because I don't have that kind of stress in my life. So, I have looked out in the world on people who are absolutely killing it, and it costs them $24,000 a year just to keep the wrinkles off of their face, So I'm not playing that game. So there are choices that I've definitely made myself as an entrepreneur. I am not just speaking this and offering this advice. I am trying to live this advice as well. My grandmother told me one of the most important lessons in her life was to stop spending money like a poor person. She was poor, but she knew what that meant. She knew from being Depression era what that meant in her life. And so she stopped. And it was a really important lesson for her because she was definitely heading down that hoarding path.
Grandma Laurie spoke volumes. We do not talk enough in our society about the people that actually spend the most money are the people that don't have it because of this consumerism PR campaign narrative that you lacking and then you being able to put some pennies together to go get that thing that is not providing any kind of investment value to you is going to make you feel good for 2 seconds. It's going to make you feel like a rich person for 2 seconds. But if you can't pay your light bill, what does that mean? And growing up, I had parents who would tell me the same thing over and over again. They were like, do not spend money like you're poor.
There is something to be said for buying items that bring you joy and bring you comfort.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I have walked this line in my life and asked this question regularly, especially now with the event business being where it is, the keynote speeches are not rolling in like they used to. Like, do I really need this thing? What kind of joy is it providing me? And I have to have this conversation regularly because I like retirement. I like not working forever. And so my husband and I have done very well. I want to figure out, what do I need to live a good life, a meaningful life, a life of value, but not be surrounded by trinkets and trash, which growing up, I saw in my family of origin, right? You ask me where my people are from, they're from the dollar store, you know? They're from going out and buying things that didn't really matter and then storing it away in the basement. Thereof standing in line at Best Buy to get the new game, right? When you used to do that kind of thing, right?
Oh, Black Friday.
Black Friday.
I remember camping out in front of the Walmart or the Target
Yeah.
to get
Yeah.
the thing 50% off. But do you need the thing? I don't know.
And I am for anybody pursuing joy. But again, without really knowing who you are and what you stand for and what you don't stand for, that joy I know in my own life is fleeting. And so I have really tried to learn that lesson. And so with people who come to me and say, I've lost my job, I do this thing where I've been pro bono coaching people for a long time. I can only take on 4 people at a time. I generally find them on LinkedIn when they have some sort of like terrible post. And I say, okay, we're going to work together. Like, let's do this. I've got time on my schedule. And we have a conversation all the time about what do you really need? What does your family need? What do your children need to bring joy, to bring happiness? Turns out they need dinner. They need healthcare. They need time with their family. They may need that sport thing that they do. But then we start to figure out, okay, what is this budget, this emotional budget, this financial budget? We start to break it down. And that's the work really only you can do for yourself. It's part of self-leadership. That's why it's hard.
So before we close, reintroduce yourselves to us. Who are you?
I am Laurie Ruettimann. I'm a writer. I'm a speaker. I've been a podcaster. I've done all these things. But most of all, I'm just a human being who wants to remind people that your work is not your worth. I wrote a book a couple years ago that did very well. It's called Betting on You, where I tell the story of my own journey, but the journey of others and trying to figure out how to decouple your identity from work. And I'm also someone who is absolutely available for the story. Like, I want to hear it. Like, I want people to reach out to me and tell me what they believe to be true about work. And Lexi, that's how you and I have connected. You've got such a beautiful story of your own. And I'm just lucky to be in your orbit and to learn from you regularly. So thanks again for asking me to be here today.
No, thank you. Thank you so much. I'm so honored to have you. I remember the first time we met, I was like, oh, this woman is doing dope shit. Like this woman gets it soulfully. And as I navigate my worth within capitalism, and I always tell folks, like, I started doing this journey in my mid-20s when I was like, this can't be it. This is it. And still navigating that. And now becoming a mom recently and having to re-navigate that. Because the decisions, the actions and choices pre-mom that I would make sometimes are not the decisions and actions and choices and behaviors. Now that I have this little human looking at me saying, like, so what are we doing? It literally is your job to take care of me. Go do that.
You have given the world a gift by becoming a parent. We need people to raise smart, wonderful, intelligent, curious individuals who are going to solve the problems that we are leaving for them. We need this. So thank you for giving us that gift to the world. But also, I think parenthood is a gift to yourself. You get an opportunity to really learn and grow and develop on your own. So I love to see you embracing that challenge of constantly developing and becoming the next version of who you are. It never ends when you're a parent. And good for you for betting on yourself to be a parent. I love that.
Thank you. It wasn't 100% me, but I'm a goddamn delight, Laurie. But it wasn't 100% me. But I really, really appreciate that. And we will talk soon.